They say silence cuts deeper than sharp words. That day I finally realized that painful truth. I stood over the small cake I had bought for my son, Benson. It had blue icing and happy 8th birthday, messily written by some bored teenager. Balloons were deflated in the corner of our Seattle apartment. Paper plates were neatly set out, but the chairs all around the table remained empty. My son, Benson, kept asking, "When are they going to arrive, Dad?" I offered him a weak, hopeful smile. I told him maybe the highway traffic was bad. Maybe his grandmother got turned around. Maybe his aunts were just delayed. But I knew in my gut that no one was showing up. When he finally blew out his candles with only my clapping, his little shoulders sagged as if he was already learning what true rejection felt like. That night, when he asked, "Why didn't they show up, Dad?" I had absolutely no response. However, a week later I received a clear answer. A text message from my mother. "Naomi, no apology, no reason, just a straightforward invitation. Sweet 17 for your cousin, $1,700 per guest. Zelmi." That was it. They had completely skipped my son's birthday, yet had the incredible nerve to bill me as if I were merely a business associate. I stared at that message until my hand shook with a sudden intense emotion. It was no longer sadness, it was pure focused rage. I used to believe that family was an unbreakable constant. I supported them through holidays, sent them money whenever they needed it, and invented excuses every time they failed me. I thought that shared ancestry meant loyalty. Instead, that blood had left my son sitting alone in a quiet room, candles burning for people who never bothered to attend. That was the instant my patience completely vanished. It was more than just the party. I began replaying every discussion, every demand they ever made, every time my generosity was simply expected. They never showed up when it truly counted. They only ever called when they wanted something. And now they expected me to pay for some ridiculous party while my own child was treated as if he didn't even exist. That message was not just an invitation. It was absolute confirmation. It proved exactly where I stood in their hierarchy. A useful wallet, a completely disposable person. I did not respond with anger. I responded with absolute precision. I transferred $1, not $1,700, not zero, just a single dollar. It was enough to be noticed, enough to ensure they knew I had seen their bold demand. The note I attached said all that was necessary. Congratulations, no kind words, no forgiveness accepted. Just a knife slipped in cleanly. Then I immediately changed the house. Locks blocked their phone numbers and wiped all their access from my existence. If they couldn't be there for my son, they would never set foot inside my home again. I assumed that would be the end of the conflict. But getting even has a way of disturbing predators you never knew were watching. 2 days later, the police knocked on my front door. My son, Benson, froze on the sofa. I opened it calmly, my heart beating steadily. I had half expected this kind of move. "Sir, we received a report regarding a disruption, a possible child welfare check." I nearly chuckled. They had used law enforcement as a weapon against me. They had claimed I was unstable, perhaps neglecting my son. It was a cowardly, desperate, and entirely predictable tactic. I let the officers enter. My apartment was spotless. Dinner was simmering on the range. My son was seated with his school work laid out neatly. I walked them through every room as if I were giving them a detailed tour. I was calm, polite, completely in control. They left looking embarrassed. That's when I finally realized this was not merely neglect. This was deliberate sabotage. My family wasn't satisfied just to ignore us. They wanted to destroy me, and that's when I decided I had to end the connection permanently. I started small. Every joint bank account we shared was immediately closed. Every spare key they might have had was replaced. Every photograph of them in my apartment was removed. Then I moved on to their structure. My mother, Naomi, had always relied on me to handle her utility payments. Quietly, I canceled the automatic withdrawals coming from my account. Her electricity, her vehicle, insurance, her small financial safety nets were all gone in one swift move. My sister Eliza used my residential address for her mail order packages. I returned every single delivery stamped recipient. Unknown, they began feeling the financial squeeze before they even understood that I was the one deliberately pulling their world apart. Then came the final definitive strike. That extravagant Sweet 17 they were so focused on. I called the event venue. My name was still listed as an emergency contact from a previous occasion I had helped them manage. I calmly informed the venue manager that the payment card they had on file was invalid and that the person organizing the event had a known history of financial fraud. The booking was immediately frozen. By the time my mother, Naomi, found out, she was forced to scramble for new last-minute arrangements which were far more expensive, rushed, and completely humiliating. They wanted my money. Instead, they received my silence and total disorder in their lives. When my mother, Naomi, finally managed to reach me using a trick to bypass the blocked number, voice was shaking with pure rage. How could you do this to your own family? I let the silence hang heavy and still before I gave her my final response. Family, I said. My son cried into his cake while you people ignored him. That was the exact moment you stopped being my family. Everything that has happened since then is simply business. She began screaming. I hung up the phone. That was the last time I have ever heard her voice. I tell myself I did it only for him, for my son, Benson, so he would see that his father wasn't weak. That silence is not the same as surrender. He doesn't know the ugly details. He doesn't need to. All he knows is that his father was there when nobody else was. And when he blew out his candles on his birthday this year, he didn't even ask who was coming. He already understood the only one that truly matters